for example, of what you saw when you were driving the car, when another car hits you, for example. You can have nightmares, trouble sleeping. So PTSD develops when people don't correctly process a traumatic event. So it develops after being exposed to a traumatic event, which is not correctly sort of processed in memory, and therefore people that have PTSD will experience flashbacks, have nightmares, will be very stressful, because for them it will feel at times like the traumatic event is happening again in the here and now.
Experiencing an event alone is not enough. There need to be risk factors or vulnerability factors, because some people develop PTSD and others don't after the same type of events. There's been a lot of research about it. Important risk factors that emerge from this research are, for instance, social support. So a lack of social support is a negative predictor of post-traumatic stress disorder.
PTSD, and I think especially the severe forms of PTSD, can have a very severe impact, because people sometimes feel like the traumatic event is happening again. It feels almost as real as when they were exposed to the traumatic event. That is in itself very stressful, and they will also develop very negative thoughts about the event, and sometimes about themselves. Sometimes people feel very guilty about what happened to them, or they are ashamed, which you often see when people have been abused, for example. So I think there's several aspects to PTSD that impacts people's lives in different ways, but in total, especially when it's very severe, it limits people a lot.
There could be various ways to recognize PTSD. It can manifest itself in various ways. But you could recognize it, for instance, if people get withdrawn from socially. For instance, they withdraw in themselves, for instance, because they avoid all sorts of situations and cues that remind them of the traumatic event. And they feel sort of numbed, a bit depressive. Avoidance is one thing, difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, but also not being able to work, for instance.
Flashbacks are an important part of it, so feeling and seeing very vivid images of parts of the event. You can have nightmares, trouble sleeping. You can become agitated and start sort of avoiding those kind of triggers, although not everyone does that consciously. Not everyone is aware of that. But then again, I also think that it's important to not like self-diagnose. Go to the GP and then get a referral to a psychologist. I think in all cases, and then not necessarily specific to PTSD, is that people need support. In order to support them is to give them, social support, emotional support.
In the end, I think professional treatment is very important. You can't treat people yourself, so you will need to go for professional mental health care.
Yeah, there are very successful treatments for PTSD available. There is a range of different types of treatments. So you have treatments that are more like generally, not necessarily specifically focused on treating the PTSD or reprocessing the trauma, and then you have a category of treatments which is called trauma-focused treatment.
One treatment that is a first-line treatment is writing therapy. Writing about the traumatic memories, and describing them in writing in as much detail as possible. And we know writing therapy online or face-to-face is quite effective in treating PTSD. But I feel that the potential of writing therapy is not fully used yet.
I think my research contributes in several ways. First, we study the effectiveness of treatments, which is necessary in order to know which treatments work best, but we also want to focus on what works best for whom, sort of selecting treatments based on certain characteristics of the patient, for example. I study the working mechanisms of treatment, so do they work via a different pathway? I also try to study at least the different pathways via which PTSD develops in order to gain a better understanding of the factors involved, the types of traumas that have an impact, for example, which may be helpful in preventing the development of PTSD in the first place, but also it could be also used to recognize it in earlier in people and then offering better treatments, for example.